Hello and welcome to this presentation on onboarding your customers to Business Central. My name is Søren Alexandersen. I'm a product manager in the Business Central engineering team. I'm here with Jakob Winter, who is our design studio lead, to talk to you about how you can onboard customers more easily to Business Central. Now, we're going to talk about various different topics today, all of which will help you scale your business to onboard customers faster. Let's start at the beginning. The feedback we get from you, our partners, is that you have customers knocking on your door, but you don't have enough consultants to serve them. This is a bottleneck, of course, and it impedes your ability to scale your business. And we don't want that. So we have built quite a few tools in the box of Business Central to help you achieve scale. Before we go there, let's just start with the vision for onboarding and the vision for the product in terms of how the customers gets onboarded. Now, we believe that the customer should be able to find, explore, and start using Business Central plus add-ons by themselves. This, of course, doesn't mean that there are no partners in this mix. On the contrary, you have apps, you have services, you have knowledge. But we believe that that knowledge could be brought into the product as apps and as services. We believe that a good product experience is about setting the right defaults. Instead of dragging the customer and users through all of the setup that needs to be done for Business Central to work, you can define that setup, you can define those defaults, and then let the customer self-serve. And we've built some tools for you that makes this a possibility. And the same goes for learning material. It should be easy for the customer to find and get unblocked, find help when they need it, both for your offerings, but also for the standard product. So what we're going to talk about today is how can you achieve that scale that is necessary? Because there's just huge opportunity out there. We've seen the numbers and various business cases and SMB growth all over the place. So it doesn't make sense that there's bottlenecks if we can do anything about that. So we need to scale more. You need to scale more, and self-serve and automation are the answers to that question. So let's dive into onboarding as a topic. And Jakob, could you introduce us to what is onboarding? What do we think about when we say onboarding?
I certainly will. Thank you, Søren. So let's take the customer perspective here and look a bit at what is onboarding in the eyes of the user or the customer. And we'll start with a quick definition here that onboarding is about familiarizing a new customer client with one's products or services. So this is really about making the user understand what your offering is about and how they are going to get value from that. Before we look at the product, let's look at a sort of overview of the different customer journeys that we have been looking at for the onboarding investments we have done here. So, as I'm sure a lot of you have tried or seen online, every customer can go into dynamics.com and hit the try for free button, get up the Kronos demo data. They can either advance and go forward and try with their own data, and we help them contact a partner. That's a journey we've had for a while, and there's sort of an equivalent of that in a partner space. So really with the tools we provide, any partner can pick up the same idea, make it available publicly to customers that can try the demo and get onboarded with their own company. But the one I want to dive into here in a moment is the part where you have your customer already landed, and it's not so much about convincing them to buy, it's more like making them go live in the product. So for that, we provide the same set of tools to make it super easy for you to get the customer live through creating tenants, uploading the choice of apps and config that you need, have the customer's admin or owner sign in, do some setup, and then have their employees sign in. So that's sort of the online equivalent of an on-premise onboarding. And really our mission around onboarding is to make these steps super easy for you to achieve. So let's look at how the customer experiences their their first meeting with Business Central after the tenant has been deployed, the apps have been loaded, the config data is set up, and so on. So you see that we have a very prominent new appearance in the role center, what we call the welcome banner, greeting the user and making them sort of feel welcome, expected even, and ready to start their part of the setup. And the user can decide to go ahead, or they can actually park this particular banner if they had some other manual setup they prefer to do first. So we made the welcome banner sort of an optional thing that they can resume at any point in time when they choose to. When they start doing the setup task, the checklist, as we call it, shows up in the banner and giving a nice overview of what are the expected tasks for the admin or the owner to get started with Business Central. An important point here, and we're going to repeat it a number of times, is that this is actually what we call a role-specific checklist. So let's try and switch role just to illustrate that the business manager is the default role, but let's play another role of the accountant and just see how that looks when you get into Business Central as an accountant. And what we'll notice here is that the accountant role has a different checklist, which makes sense, of course, since when you're setting up Business Central, you might have different roles working together to set up their particular area of expertise in Business Central. So the checklist works the same way, even if it has different content across the different roles. So the user can select and get an overview about the different steps in the checklist, and most users will likely complete the checklist in the sequence we put up here, but in theory they could skip steps and go straight to some particular interest of theirs. Okay, so we've seen the checklist now, how it appears to the user. So let's check out how these checklists are actually defined in the product. So we call up what is known as the checklist administration page, because that's the glance behind the scenes, so to speak, at how the checklist items are defined. And I'll bookmark this quickly because we're going to need it a couple of times. So this is the list of all the checklist items. And I think the most easy to understand thing is that we just go ahead and create a new one so you can see how that sort of works. And the checklist administration page let me pick between the different types available, and Søren will talk about that a bit more later. For the example here, we'll just choose a really simple manual setup page, pretending that the accountant will need an additional setup page to complete his checklist. And accountants are often dealing with, let's say, the general ledger. So let's see if we can find the general ledger task. So we have now decided that the accountant should go ahead and set up the general ledger. We just pick that task here, and you see some information is filled out down the page. One of the important fields I have to fill in here is I need to tell what role is it that I want this new setup task for. That's all that's needed, and that means that when we come back to the Business Manager Role Center, you see that it has gotten the new checklist item, the general ledger, that we added for both the accountant and the Business Manager role. You might not want it to be the first in this case, and the checklist admin will let you provide a sequence number so that it is slotted into the list at the right point in time. And that means you can build the checklist you need to get users going live with Business Central. And just to give you an example here, let's say the user settings is a task that I want to promote to my users when they get started, because this lets me show you a nice addition to Business Central in this release here from the page teaching tip that you've seen earlier, also in latest release. There's now the option to open our new help pane, which provides contextual help for users on any page in Business Central. And in a moment, Søren will tell you more about the help pane. So with that, you've seen how you can build checklists that are for individual roles, checklist items that can be shared among roles, and when you share them, they can either be something you need to complete for every role or for any of the roles here. So the last thing we want to mention in terms of the checklist build-up is really that you can also create new types. That requires code, and that is what Søren will tell us about next.
Thank you very much for that great demo of how the checklist system works in Business Central. Now, the checklist system is really core to the self-serve experience that we want customers to have. Imagine you've come with configuration packages or brought in all the default setup data, maybe 90% of it, 95%, and the customer just needs to fill in those blanks. So you add to the checklist what is needed to sort of fill the last mile setup, so to speak. Let's talk about what you can do, what you should do. And before we do that, we should talk a bit about the different kinds of partners out there, because we use the term partners broadly here. And regardless of which type of partner you are, there are things in the toolbox that can be relevant for you. So just to sort of, let's say, categorize the type of partners, we have the traditional reseller, what we call a VAR, a value-adding reseller. That would typically be the one that brings the customer online, that adds their configuration packages, their data for the industry, for their country, and so on. Maybe they do a few per-tenant extensions as well to customize bits and pieces of the system. Maybe they run, that customer run pure vanilla BC with some app source apps that you have in your, let's say, some trusted apps you have in your backpack. Then there's the ISV that sell their apps directly to customers or through partners to customers. And there's something for you here as well. Actually, there's a lot that you can go do already. And then there's the third category, which is not really a partner category. It's more a category of customers where, customers that just needs heavy customization for whatever reason. And this just goes to show how the broad span of Business Central customers are. There's something for you here as well for the customization projects as well. So let's dive into what you can do here, and we'll start with the ISV type. So for all ISVs out there, all of you building apps or PTEs, per-tenant extensions, this is for you. So as Jakob just showed, he picked something to be inserted into the checklist, and for something to be picked, in order for that to be a possibility, you and we, as developers of the base application, need to expose elements, pages, features to the checklist. And we do that by adding elements to a table we call guided experience item. We added this table back in version 18, so in the 2021 Wave 1 update. And we migrated all of our assisted setups, all our manual setups to this table. And that's why Jakob was able to pick one of the manual setups there. Now, you should consider which of your pages, which of your elements should be added to this table as well. Because when you do, and it's actually a matter of adding very little code, you'll see an example here on screen where I just added one element in terms of a manual setup. Now, you need to go through in your apps today, what should be pickable, what do you want customers and consultants out there to be able to pick and insert into their checklists? And because that is really what we want to unlock here. If you do that and you expose your features to the checklist, you unlock and help unlock no-code, low-code scenarios out there so that a consultant or an administrator or customer, some SME can build checklists just by clicking. And that's really what we want to go towards. So make sure that you go through your apps, your features to see, hey, where can I, out of the box, when someone installs my app, where can I expose my elements to this guided experience table? When you do that, you should be aware of the different types that you can add here. You have the concept of assisted setups. You know them. These are the wizard type experiences in a click, next, finish fashion that are just really great for taking the customer by the hand, guiding them through a process. You can use them for all kinds of things, like just-in-time configuration, just-in-time download of extra data that will be applied, or what have you. So please consider using assisted setups where you can. You have manual setups, which it's the sales and receivable setup, it's the inventory setup, the general ledger setup, kind of tables, pages that you want to expose. Be sure to add them as well. Then there's a type called learn, and learn is basically pointing to any URL out there. We call it learn because we hope you will link to something that can help educate the customer, and we use it to point out to our docs learn. It's up to you what you want to point to, but preferably some kind of support site, some kind of documentation site. Then there's the Spotlight Tour type, which is really exciting. With a Spotlight Tour, you can take any of your pages and open it in a Spotlight Tour mode, which will turn on a bright spotlight on the share to teams and analyze in Excel features. That's a really cool way to show off how great your data, how your entities work well with the Microsoft 365 offerings. Then there's the possibility to embed video inside the checklist. Great for education, great also in a demo scenario when you want to show some kind of marketing video. You can use video and embed it inside Business Central and show it right there, so users don't have to leave the product. Finally, then there's the application feature. This is basically if you want to open any other page, any page from the checklist. You want to point them to a feature like the sales orders, use the application feature type there. Right, those were the different types. Go through your apps and see which ones are relevant for you. Then, speaking of education, you've probably seen the teaching tips we've added to the product. What we've done in the 2022 Wave 1 release is that we've added the opportunity to use rich text, formatting a few types of rich text inside these teaching tips to make them more readable. You can use bold, italic, and you can even link to other Business Central pages. And that link will work like a navigation, like you'd navigate to that page. You see the example on screen here where we're on the sales invoice page linked to the posted sales invoice list. Again, speaking of help, in this release, we've added a contextual help pane, or rather we had the help pane, but now we worked on how to get the content into the help pane here. And what you get here now for free with your apps is that the context-sensitive links that you provided in your app and in your pages will get surfaced here inside the help pane automatically. We will figure out if there are any apps present extending this given page and surface the help link here. So that's really a good way and a good opportunity for you to go double check that you have set the links to the right URLs out there that will support your app. So in summary, there's a lot of great things here for you to go check in your apps already. You can use the, make sure to expose yourself to the checklist. Use the assisted setups for the smooth and setups and taking the customer by the hand. Use the teaching tips in your app on the pages to make sure that you increase the customer's chance of success with their pages. Use rich text in teaching tips as well. Be mindful of the context-sensitive help URLs. And of course, consider the demo scenarios with all of these features as well. Right, that was for the ISV. Then let's have a look from the reseller perspective. Now, we mentioned that, or you saw that Jakob did the checklist manually, or that he added some things manually to the checklist. Well, at this point where the checklist is built, it's just data residing in tables as any other data. That means that data can be imported and exported. So you can export a checklist to a rapid start package, to a configuration package, and import it. You can even use the management APIs to import a rapid start package. So consider all this automation where you could bring the configuration packages plus the data for the checklist for that type of customer. It really unlocks many self-serve scenarios if you do it like that. So you can bring the checklist data, of course, through code, through configuration packages, and also using the experience that that Jakob showed before. Here's just an example of how to insert checklist data from code. As you see, it's very simple. It's a very few lines of code to actually populate a checklist. And you can, of course, do this for someone else's app. As long as a third party has exposed their app to the guided experience item table, as we showed before, you, as a consultant, can take those elements and build them into a checklist. It doesn't have to be your own app. So you see, for resellers, there's a lot of go-tos here as well. Use the automation APIs as much as you can to spin up the environment, to create the company, to synchronize users, to add data. You can do almost everything up to the point where you can hand over the environment to the customer so they can self-serve the last mile setup. Default and template as much as possible instead of dragging the customer through all the setup. There's no need. He will find the setup when he needs it. So let customers self-serve. Use videos in the checklist to explain about how to use your app, or use Business Central in the way that you recommend that it is used for a specific vertical or industry. And you can also, if you don't know, you can even override our teaching tips. So if you don't like the teaching tip that we show on the sales order, you can override it. You can bring your own pack of teaching tips for an industry that makes Business Central relevant, or to increase the chance of good learning for that specific customer. Now, I've talked about these capabilities. I'd love to hear how you should think about using them, and because there are certain best practices and guidelines. And Jakob, can you tell us about that?
Thank you, Søren. So this next section, I'll tell a bit about the guidelines for how to use all these new features, so that you can make users start using Business Central in a nice and understandable way. You've seen the banner now several times. And as I already mentioned, the purpose of the banner is really to make people feel expected when they come into Business Central, and give them a brief introduction to what they're up for next. It's not meant to be a part of the experience on a day-to-day basis. It's a banner that we created for the very special events like Welcome to the Product, or maybe in later releases we will use it for an upgrade or what's new kind of messages. But other than that, we don't intend the banner to be something that the user encounter on a daily basis. Now, when the checklist is hosting when the banner is hosting the checklist is, as you've seen now, the place where the user refer to the next thing they should be doing in terms of setup. So the guidelines for this is sort of falling out from the demo you've seen here, that the guided experiences items create and in a way where it is relevant to the role. And really the trick here is not to overload the user with checklist items. It's really the case that fewer is better. Of course, assuming that the checklist items you put forward is actually bringing the user to a place where they can start using Business Central. You've seen the page teaching tip. The page teaching tip is a brilliant way of educating, especially the learning user, about a new page they're coming to, typically for the first time. So the page teaching tip is defined as part of the page definition. And in Wave 1, 2022, you see, and how Søren explained, that you can now have links. There's a customer templates link in the tip you see on the right. Tips needs to be brief. If they're too long, we've seen repeatedly in our user studies that users simply skip them. It becomes too overwhelming if it's a long paragraph of text that you put in the teaching tip. So even if a long text is well intended, it's usually not being read by the users. That's at least what we have seen in the user studies of this. The page teaching tip's equivalent within the page is what we call the field teaching tip. So the field teaching tip provides a similar way to describe a important concept on a page. And you might ask yourself, how does a field teaching tip and a tool tip complement each other? And quickly stated, the field teaching tip is only meant to be used for very important fields on the page, while a tooltip is typically present on all fields. So use the field teaching tips on only the handful of pages or actions on a page where it is really important that the user understands their role when they first meet a page. We have been asked a number of times about how does the sequence of field teaching tips play out. And it's a very simple rule. Field teaching tips appear in the order of appearance in the page. So Business Central will simply show the field teaching tips in the upper part first and then move its way down to the page. And we found that that is a very simple principle that works very well in most cases. If you need a more hand-holded custom order or sequence around the page, that is not currently something you can define in with the field teaching tips we provide now. And in a special version of the page teaching tips are the spotlight tips. Søren mentioned them briefly before. Spotlight tips are extravagant page teaching tips. They tell a particular story about a certain feature on a page. They can really call out attention to certain functions, and we have used them at this point in time to especially call out the Excel and the Teams integration features. But you can expect in the future that we will provide more spotlight tips for other functions in the system. Lastly, I wanted to just walk you through a quick do's and don'ts for checklists. We are using checklists in two incarnations. We are using them for the evaluation scenarios where users are trying out Business Central with demo data. And in those cases, it's usually about making users understand the value proposition for Business Central. And in that case here, it's very important to use a checklist that don't try and tell about every feature, because that is likely to overwhelm users. So it should be very simple and basic in what is being suggested. While in the case we've shown today, where you're using a checklist to get Business Central up and running in a production environment, the purpose is to get users ready to do work. So that's about making sure that users understand what they need to set up, that it's relevant for their role, and really to keep it as brief as possible, meaning, as Søren said before, load as much of the setup data as possible in a config file, leaving less for the users or admins to set up with Business Central. And with that quick summary of what makes a great checklist, I want to hand over to Søren for a quick summary.
Thank you, Jakob. Thank you for those guidelines on how to build a good checklist and what to consider. I'd like to round off with just a high-level summary of what you should now consider. It's basically what we already talked about, but just to emphasize, default as much as possible. Don't let the user go through all setup, because they don't need to know how all posting groups are set up and so on, and all the different behaviors of Business Central. Take them through what's necessary. So default as much as possible using templates. Use checklists to let them self-serve the rest of the way. In those checklists, use assisted setups also to enable the just-in-time configurations. Maybe you need additional data depending on some choices they've made. Bring your knowledge in through apps, meaning if you used to educate a customer side by side or through a Teams call, which is great, of course, consider doing a video and implementing that into the checklist so you can educate them and save your consultants for other customers. This is all about saving your talent pool for other work and let the customer self-serve. The same goes with all kinds of education, in the help pane, the tours. You want to free up your support and your consultants as much as possible. So that's what this is all about. It's about scaling your business, accelerating growth without growing your consultant pool and your pool of talents. So go to this URL. Here you'll find a lot of great documentation where you can get educated about how to use these onboarding components inside Business Central. Also, if you're on the Yammer site, there's a group there where we would happily help you, where we from the engineering team are also present, so we can guide you, and if you have any issues with using some of the components, feel free to ask your questions there. And with that, thank you so much for watching this presentation. Thank you, Jakob. Have a great day.